welcome back to the Inner Podcast, where you can embrace your inner nerd. I'm your more important host, Brandon.
Definitely not. And I'm your host, Aaron.
Yeah, there you go. See, that's why I'm more important, because I'm on cue.
I can remember my lines.
I'm kidding. How you do today, A dog?
A-Dog.
A dog.
Don't call me A-Dog.
A dog. Okay.
No. A girl that I used to work with used to call me A-Dog, and I did not like it.
I thought I was original.
She said it was rather if it wasn't A-Dog, then she would call herself Big Dog, and I was Little Dog.
Ew.
And I was like, no. No, thank you. I don't
Aaron.
No, that's worse.
Oh, okay. Well, how you do?
I'm okay.
You're just okay.
Yeah, I mean, work. There's another person leaving, and it's another person that I'm being assigned to fill in for, and it's a whole new job that I have to learn within a span of a week. And
so you're hiring?
Yeah, I guess.
Not for me.
But long story short, or spoiler alert, I guess, I don't plan on doing the job unless they give me a raise, because
that's fair.
This would be the second person that I'm filling in for.
Especially for, like, you've been there for a while, but you haven't been there long enough.
I haven't even been at this job for a whole year yet. Right,
which is insane, because they're like, oh, let's throw all this stuff on you, even though you're, like, one of the newer guys.
Yeah, like, I've within the span of, like, I don't know, not even 6 months, I've learned 2 jobs that I was not signed on for. So
that's kind of how I felt when my manager left, because I've only been at this job for like 8 weeks, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And my manager, the manager who hired me on, he leaves, and I have to take on like
that's something I still find so strange.
Third of his job,
because when you told me that.
It was the same day that your manager left, right?
It was the same week.
Oh, yeah.
We each had managers that left, yours at least had the decency to come into work and be like, oh, hey, this is my last day or whatever.
Yeah, he not only was it his last day, but he actually like did his job the last day. He didn't like half-ass or anything. He actually did what he was supposed to and acted like as if nothing was different.
Yeah, mine, just one day. We had a manager that just didn't show up, and the guy, essentially a manager that handles a different part of the business, came in and was like, hey, this guy doesn't work here anymore. He had a job opportunity that he couldn't turn down. And your boss said the same thing.
Yeah, my boss was like, he's like, an opportunity came up, and it's the best decision for me and my family, and I can't resist it. And I mean, I wasn't the one to judge, because literally the same thing happened with me when he hired me, because I was working a really well, it wasn't a shit job. It was actually a really easy job, but the pay was shit. And then I was like, he gave me that opportunity, and I was like, I can't put this down. But yeah, and that same day I told you, you're like, well, that's so weird. My manager said the exact same thing.
It had just happened,
right?
Pretty much. Yeah, it just. Anyway, yeah, it's strange, but so a lot happening in a short period of time that I did not sign on for.
Yeah,
unless I'm paid for it, but
that's what's fair. Like, if they're gonna make you do all this work, then they can at least compensate you properly so that it's worth it.
Yeah, and they've talked a lot about hiring on new people and expanding and so on and so forth. And essentially, any time they have that opportunity to do it, they just throw me in there, and they're like, "You get to learn how to do this." And it's like, I'm forced to. You're not really giving me a choice.
That's something that always pisses me off, is that higher ups always make it seem like as if like it's the opportunity to learn a new part of your job. No, it's just you guys finding an easy like corner to cut so that someone else picks up the slack, which by the way they could do themselves.
Mm-hmm.
If you ask me, like a real manager should be able to like step in and do the work, but they don't.
Right.
Which is something that I kind of like about my work is despite the previous managers that were there, the one that I'm currently working directly under, who is like a much, much higher up, he prefers that whoever gets brought on is someone who's willing to do just as much work as the people in the warehouse. So that's kind of nice. Like we're not looking for people who are going to just be like lazy dictators. They're actually going to be like part of the team.
Yeah.
I think that's how managers should be. But unfortunately, that's not the case.
No, I agree. Oh, excuse me. So you were gone.
I was. I was gone for 3 days last week at Monterey, which was a lot of fun.
I'm glad you had fun.
I've never been there. Casey's been there a few times.
Mm-hmm.
Emmett, my stepson, he's been there once. And then it was obviously Henry's first time.
Right.
Henry fucking loved it. I mean, not only is he just like an easy baby to take care of, but he gets like so excited by everything.
Yeah.
And so when he got to the aquarium and he saw these fish that could like gulp him in one sitting, it was awesome. Like his expressions were amazing the entire time. Emmett was a little overstimulated for the he's got autism, so he experiences things differently. But Casey and I waited till he kind of crashed, and me and her kind of just went through the aquarium again to like experience it for ourselves.
Yeah.
And then we like visited Canary Road a few times, checked out a lot of shops, bought a lot of trinkets for people and loved ones. Spent a shit ton of money that we probably shouldn't have, but it was definitely worth it. Like it was like in order to have that kind of experience, it was definitely worth the money.
Yeah.
We stayed at a really nice hotel. Henry, I have pictures, but Henry, we had like a corner room and it had these cool corner windows, and he would look out the windows and he would just start yelling at oncoming drivers.
Yeah.
Like so for those of you who don't know, my son Henry, he's actually about to be 1 this month on the 22nd.
Yeah.
So he's 11 months right now, but he's the cutest thing. But yeah, I have pictures of him just like looking out the window, and every time someone drove by, I say yell because he's just very vocal baby.
Yeah.
He discovered his lungs his lung capacity at a young age. He's very vocal and it's hilarious. But so that was fun. And then we checked out a comic book store, obviously, while we were there. Could have had a better experience. I've definitely had better experiences at comic book stores. It wasn't the store that was the problem. It was the one guy who worked there. I don't know if maybe he just didn't like working by himself, but he was just not pleasant to talk to, and he didn't really seem like he knew what he was talking about.
I've noticed that. I've been to comic book stores like that where the space is usually like rather, not that the space of the shop matters, but it's like whenever I've been to a shop and it's just like the one guy.
Yeah.
You would think that would be the point when it's like, oh, it's a local guy and he's like passionate about comic books, so on and so forth, and like he's excited to talk to people. But no, that's always the one time that like the guy behind the counter at a comic book store is like really, like dull.
Yeah. And I don't know his situation. I don't know if that was like his own personal shop or if he just works there or whatever. But yeah, he wasn't terrible. He just could have been better. And then we started talking about a new line that's coming out That's a spinoff to Invincible, and just based on things that he was talking about, I was like, I don't want to sound like a know-it-all, but do you know what you're talking about? Like, I don't know everything about comics, but I feel like I have a really good knowledge basis to go off of.
Mm-hmm.
And like some of the things he was saying, I'm like, dude, I kind of feel like you're just saying what someone told you and like took their word for it.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's just kind of the vibe I got. But yeah, and then after that we headed on home. But it was definitely worth it. And we actually had the conversation of maybe taking like a trip kind of like that every year. So like every year, rather even if it's not Monterey, like maybe checking out a new place every year, whether it's driving distance or whatever.
Yeah.
I want to take Casey to Seattle.
Mm.
The only downside is that she wants to drive there. That I would want to take a whole week if that was the case, like a whole week off of work, because it's a 12-hour drive.
Yeah.
So I would want to like take my time.
It'd be a pretty drive though.
It would, but like that's the thing is I would want to like take my time and I wouldn't want to feel rushed.
Mm-hmm.
I want to be able to experience the drive at my own pace there and back. I wouldn't want to have to worry about like coming back on time for work.
Mm-hmm.
But if it was like within a constricted amount of time, like 3 or 4 days or whatever, I'd prefer to fly there. And it's only an hour flight.
Yeah.
I understand why she says no, because she's had really shitty experiences, not like on a plane, but like through security and stuff, because she's always flown with children.
Mm.
And they do not give a flying fuck about your items through security when it comes to your kids. Like if you've got formula and it spills, even if they're the reason that it spilled, they don't give a shit.
Mm.
It's kind of fucked. But anyways, yeah. So we might start doing that, but we'll see.
Yeah, I was left all on my lonely lonesome.
Well, technically I invited you.
I meant in regards to the podcast.
Oh. Which, by the way, we listened to, and it was awesome. I liked it. We laughed.
I think
we had a grand old time.
I think for what I was working with, I did okay.
You did really good.
But
the whole raising hands thing killed us.
Oh.
That was just so clever. You also did a little bit more editing too, like the cricket sound effect. And
well, there was... Well, I mean, one sound effect, but the only...
I said a little more.
The only other editing that I did was purely just I caught myself in the editing process saying and like a whole bunch of times.
Yeah.
And I cut as many of them out as I could. So I didn't want it to just be me stuttering over myself. And plus there was a shit ton of pauses when I was going through it. I didn't realize how many times I was just like sitting there in silence. And I was like, I cut that out.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. It was like something I did on a whim. I was like, I have some things I could talk about that aren't like, it's not like Brandon's missing out on conversation or anything like that. So
yeah,
it is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
But speaking of things to talk about, we kind of are in that place again where we're in between some bigger topics. We're waiting for Invincible to wrap up. So this next episode that we'll record will end up having some Invincible talk.
Yeah.
And just other things to talk about. But until then, just since the last time we've done an episode together, there's just a couple things that I jotted down that I thought were remotely interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And I figured I'd toss them at you today.
I think I have like one topic
Mhm.
but it's gonna fly by.
So the first one that I wanted, I'm gonna go through these in order.
Okay.
Like as I came across these things, that's when I wrote them down.
Okay.
So the first one was this little thing I saw. Um, so the first thing that I came across was Neil. Oh my gosh, I'm blanking on his last name. The guy who created The Last of Us.
Oh, me. Blinking.
Anyways, it's whatever. But the creator of The Last of Us said that The Last of Us Part 3 probably won't happen. He essentially just said that, like, they're working on their current game and that's where they're at. And there isn't anything on The Last of Us Part 3. And I could see it. I could see the series just being left alone. It was, the second one was had such a mixed response, even though that I think it's the, that's the very annoying trend of like things growing popularity with time. I think The Last of Us Part 2 is like getting the traction that it should have had to begin with. But yeah, so I think trying to tackle that same thing a third time, unless they started new and they told like a new story with new characters or whatever, which I doubt that. Which again would also be spotty because then there's going to be those people like, what about Ellie and what about this and that? Like no one's going to be completely satisfied.
Yeah.
So just leaving it alone and leaving it to the imagination of the fans is probably the best thing to do.
I mean, that's fair to say. Me personally, I'm a huge Naughty Dog fan. I love everything that they make.
Yeah.
Like I was obsessed with Uncharted. I'm definitely obsessed with The Last of Us. I think there's even a period of my life where I got just as like dived into the world of Last of Us as like you are with Dead Space. But I think there's just a part of me because despite what anyone says about the second game, I ignore all the like crybabies who played the second game. They're like, "Oh, it's too sad. I didn't like it because it's too sad." It's good storytelling. And sometimes it's a little refreshing to have a story that doesn't have a happy ending. But
it was more than just that.
I know, but like they were all dumb reasons. But
I agree.
What is nice about the ending of part 2 is that it does have potential to have a sequel.
Mm-hmm.
But you could end it there and it's like it is what it is.
Yeah.
Which is nice. Me personally, yes, I would like to know what happens after. And sure, if there was another Last of Us game that was just like, hell, if it took place at like another part of the world.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I'm a little 50-50, but I'm not like necessarily complaining like, oh no, there's not another one, but it is kind of sad.
I think because he's also a big part of the show's production.
True.
And he's like their
it's a show.
He collaborates on it and he's right alongside the showrunner and so on and so forth. What I'm assuming is that's kind of where their focus is with The Last of Us right now because it's new and it's bringing in more like a bigger fan base and so on and so forth. Like that's kind of like where they're going to get their money back with The Last of Us Part 2 because they've already confirmed that the Part 2 is going to be split up into 2 seasons. So it'll be season 2 and 3 of The Last of Us.
Jeez.
So I'm assuming that same thing, they end it with season 3 and they make it feel even bigger than the game in terms of like more like a bigger, more grandiose ending, or they move on with The Last of Us through the show. Like maybe they do a season 4 that wraps up Ellie's story.
I would be pissed if they did that.
Well, I'm just saying that might be the whole thing. Like, well, if not Uncharted, if Naughty Dog could put everything they have into making a new great game, you know,
Mm-hmm.
why not put that same, like, why not give, the creator of The Last of Us that space to finish The Last of Us through a different medium?
Yeah, but what really pisses me off about that idea is that one, the show itself already has enough like controversy as far as like, because if you see like for people who are like diehard like Last of Us fans, a lot of them are not satisfied with most of the casting. They're not a fan of a lot of the changes that were made to the story, and they're not dramatic. They're hold on, they're not dramatic changes. It's more of just like things that they wish that were put in that weren't, and things that because of the changes that they made, um, it affected like parts later on in the story that were supposed to happen but can't happen because they changed it.
But the thing is, though, is that with when you're bringing something into a different medium, especially like live action, whether it's a movie or a show, you have to make these changes.
Again, understandable, but it's the changes that it's the specific changes that they made that some of the fans are complaining about.
Like what?
Oh Jesus. Like the fact that what's his name? Bob?
Okay.
That's his name, right? Yeah. So it's actually not the fact that he fell in love with a man that's a problem.
Well, that's a part of the lore
Right,
anyway.
but like they really dived into that. It's the fact that he, spoiler alert, it's the fact that he died when he wasn't supposed to,
Okay.
because there's not only a whole segment on that's supposed to happen,
Mm-hmm.
but it just, some people kind of felt like it was lazy because again there's a lot of stuff that's supposed to happen at that point, and they kind of just replaced it with, it was a good episode as far as like story writing, and it made a lot of people like connect with the characters.
Mm-hmm.
But again, it was a change that people wish didn't have to be made. But what I was originally trying to get to is that me personally, especially with how much I am not a fan with some of the decisions they've made, especially when it comes to not only storytelling but casting,
Mm-hmm.
I would hate the idea that they finished such a crucial story with the least favored version of the characters. While the characters, the versions that people care more about, which is the video game version,
Mm-hmm.
is the one that they decided not to go along with. Like, I would personally hate the idea that they finished the entire Last of Us story, like the whole Ellie arc, with the show and not with the game. That would irritate the shit out of me.
Okay, but it's the way I see it. Okay, first off, with the whole whoever's upset about Bob dying before he was supposed to, think about the segment in the game that Bob exists in.
Right.
He exists in a point when he's in a town all by himself with traps everywhere and the infected swarming, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But aside from like a couple pretty intense like swarm moments and then the whole thing about like jump starting the truck and trying to get through all the zombies and then the one moment in the school, aside from those three things, it's more than an hour's worth of gameplay of Joel and Ellie still, and then Bob. Whilst the whole show is already Joel and Ellie. Then there's a whole other aspect that they decided to emphasize more. So why not change the pacing of the show for one episode and give Bob, kind of a more sincere ending than what he got in the game? You know,
Yeah.
it's like because also in a live action format, that section could have ended up being really drawn out and boring because you're not playing as these characters, you're just watching them going through an empty town
Yeah.
again, with the exception of one guy. So, and they're able to shrink that down into, again, a very compelling and sincere episode, and it being able to emphasize a new story of characters that still have something to do with the game, but shift the narrative over to the bad guys in like the following episodes, which I thought was just as interesting. And then it still leads to all the same really impactful parts of the game,
Right.
which they're probably going to do with this next season. They're going to take all the really important stuff, emphasize those, and then for any leeway that they can be a little bit creative, they'll shrink down some of the things that don't matter as much or maybe don't have much of an emphasis because you're not playing as these characters. So,
Yeah.
same thing with like Ellie and her friend, like when she found out that she was immune. It's like they dimmed it back to a couple flashbacks and like and then an episode instead of it being again a longer drawn out gameplay sequence. You know?
I thought there was an entire episode based on that.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like a couple flashbacks in an episode,
Right.
whilst the game's version of it was much more drawn out.
Yeah. I mean,
So they have to make these compromises so that it flows better.
but overall, aside from the changes that were made for storytelling purposes, which again I understand, it's more of if there was a vote on like, okay, we're gonna finish out Ellie's story, like we want her to have like a proper conclusion, whatever that may be,
Right.
I would be genuinely upset if they decided to do it through the TV show instead of the game. And I understand that Naughty Dog themselves are working on a new game, which is great,
Mm-hmm.
but it's more of just like, I don't know. I feel like for especially like something specifically for the fans, you're giving them the lesser version of it instead of the one that they could experience in the way that they experienced the first two games.
I think that's a biased opinion, though.
I don't. I mean, sure. Like obviously, the people who watch the TV show that don't play the games, they're gonna feel the opposite about it. But I don't know. I feel like the story, if it's gonna be finished, it should be finished the authentic way, not the way that's got more.
Look at it this way, just to open up your mind a little bit. Not saying that this is the case, but again, the guy who created this show, The Last of Us, and he's helping and he's a collaborator on the show.
Mm-hmm.
What if the way he sees it and like letting his team at Naughty Dog put together a new game, blah, 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 blah. What if the way he sees it is that this way he can clean up the narrative a little bit with seasons 2 and season 3, maybe fix some of the things that he thought he missed the mark on, or maybe some things that the audience didn't like. And then he does a season 4 that wraps up Ellie's story. And that way, everyone, including both game fans and show fans, get to experience the ending of The Last of Us together. Like, the idea is that like not only does he get to tell a story that he wants, but he gets to tell it in a medium and in a very rare situation where two different fan bases get to share the same experience. Okay, well, I think we're both taking this a little too seriously. It's purely just a hypothetical based on what he said. Because we really don't even know.
True.
Season 4 probably won't end up ever being a thing, and The Last of Us Part 3 as a game probably won't ever end up being a thing.
And unfortunately, a remake of Dead Space 2 might not be a thing.
It's not. They've already said it. Like, it's just not happening. I mean, EA, it's more. It's not as surprising. EA's always been about numbers and sales and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And that's just kind of where the game industry is right now in general.
So unfortunate because it did so well.
Yeah, like they wanted to sell a certain amount of copies or whatever, but I don't know. I feel like the game industry doesn't have like. You would think there would be like they would have some kind of like PR people or whatever it would be in their studios and amongst like the corporate part that would like open up YouTube. Like when a game goes big and it's well received, all you have to do is open up YouTube. And if your algorithm is based in like video games or media at all, you'll see the game pop up.
Not only that, but like I think it's been like the idea of remakes have been kind of controversial, just not only with video games, but with like most media, like movies, video games, what have you.
Right.
But like out of all the things that they did right was fucking Dead Space. Because you literally took every single thing that people loved from the first game.
Yeah.
Which was everything.
Right.
And just did the exact same thing but better.
Right.
Which is all they needed to do with all remakes. Like, don't get me wrong, like what they did with like the Resident Evil remakes was kind of cool. Just like bringing like the old stories but bringing them back. I'm not a huge fan of like how it was done as far as like the studios that did it, because it's still like a lot of like Japanese studios that are trying to make something very Western, and it just doesn't really work out.
Okay.
And then like the Silent Hill remake, that was pretty cool. And then depending on who you ask, some things were done better, some things were done not as well. But like Dead Space was just like on the dot. It was just,
yeah.
Ooh, I have no fucking complaints about that game. They even added things like just small tweaks just to make it like a little bit more immersive and what have you.
Right.
And that's all they need to do with the second one.
Yeah.
And like hell, if they don't make a third one, fine, but like at least do the second game, the one that everyone fucking loves.
Yeah, I think what Dead Space just really needed was, I know this sounds super corny, it just needed a chance.
Yeah.
Like, I think, regardless, I mean, if the game tanks, that's one thing. If it's like it releases and it's like super buggy, it doesn't hold up to the old game, if it's not well received, rated bad, whatever, that's one thing. But if the game does well, if it performs well, if it looks good, if it, brings value to the game itself and like anything to the gaming community, then it should at least be considered, be like, okay, the second game originally was also a big deal.
Yeah.
Let's do that, see how that goes. And then if that does what EA's been wanting out of Dead Space all these years and potentially makes their money's worth out of it, then they do what we've been asking for and redo Dead Space 3.
Yeah.
And start from scratch. And potentially end off Dead Space the way it was intended to be with Dead Space 4.
Right.
But again, it's like they're so fixated on numbers at this point that it's not like they're not a multi-billion-dollar company that are making other games. Like they're acting like everything, all their hopes and dreams are like put into one game. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
I don't know, but
it was also a prime example that like games that they actually like spent their time on um, really paid off in the end,
Right.
instead of just like mass producing garbage.
Yeah. Anyway.
Anywho.
So back to my little list here. The second thing that I have written down, this is a weird one. I'm sure you saw it on social media, but I had to bring it up.
Ruh-roh.
So I don't know if you remember this, but a few years ago they announced that they were doing a Powerpuff Girls show, a live action one,
Yeah.
a CW one. And it was like the girls are grown up. It's a more mature show.
Oh my god. This is real?
It was. The good news is that it was canceled.
Thank God.
The bad news is that footage was released of the show. So-called, it's not super polished, but there again, in my opinion, CW shows don't look very polished. It was bad. It was like there was like scenes of like them flying around and
Oh no.
like using their powers, and it just looked really bad. It looked like a Smosh skit from like 2010. It
Oh,
looked really
God.
bad. And I
have to see this footage.
I'm so glad personally. Like I'm a DC fan. You know, I'm a ride or die DC guy.
Yeah.
But I was not for the CW era of DC.
I wasn't either. I give the first season of Arrow some credit. Less about like the story, because I'm not a huge fan of I'm not a huge fan. I fucking hate their version of Arrow because it's just Batman.
It's just Batman.
But I do give them credit for like how they actually like put in some effort when it came to like some of the fighting, and like it was a lot more grounded than the rest of the show.
Mm-hmm.
Like it was kind of like a Wish version of the Daredevil show. I love the Daredevil show. Like they were trying to make like this grounded, edgy, like crime fighter show. Just Daredevil did it better. But I really liked the first 2 seasons of The Flash.
Mm-hmm.
And like when it came to CGI, yeah, it's not like perfect. It's not the greatest, but it is what it is for a show.
Mm-hmm.
And I could look past it, but I really liked the first seasons. Like I genuinely enjoyed them, and I was so excited for more. And then season 3, I was like, it's okay. Like I'll watch it. It's cool, but it's all right. But season 4 and is when they started making like horror movie decisions. Like, why would you do that if you could just do this and everything would be fine? And then the show just got way worse from there. They started like singing a lot, and they started doing like a lot of weird shit. So yeah, first 2 seasons of Flash, maybe the first season of Arrow. Supergirl sucked. Black Lightning actually wasn't that bad for the first season from what I remember. But I have my own opinions, which I'm not going to get into for those reasons. But, and then the Legends of Tomorrow was garbage.
Oh, yeah.
The show that somehow went on for as long as it did.
Stargirl.
Yeah, the show that tried to mock like Zack Snyder like effects, but like still CW writing.
And the one show that I still can't, to this day can't for the life of me understand why it has such a huge following is Superman and Lois.
We talked about that on a previous episode.
God.
That show's stupid.
I don't get it. I really don't.
It sucks.
I don't like I don't like the 2 sons. I don't like the guy who plays Clark at all.
I don't like an angry
Not that I don't
Superman.
like him as an actor. I just don't like him as Clark Kent. I don't like him as Superman. Yeah, I don't know.
he was a better Superman in the Supergirl show because from the clips that I saw of him as Superman, I was like, I could see why they casted him. But then it's weird, like, because once the Superman show started, it flipped. I was like, I don't get it. Why does this suck so much, and why is he wearing so much muscle pads?
Yeah, I don't know. It's kind of strange. Like, he got super muscular for his own show.
Just for them to put pads on.
Yeah.
That's so dumb. Because he didn't even have pads in the Supergirl show. Like, they just gave him a suit.
Yeah.
And sure, like, he wasn't, like, as bulky of a Superman that most people would prefer, but, like, I would have preferred that over a muscle suit.
Yeah. Their Doomsday was weird.
Ugly.
Like, sure, he looked pretty close to Doomsday in, like, the last episode or whatever. But, like, the whole creation of Doomsday and, like, it was all just very weird. Yeah, but the Powerpuff Girls, I'm so glad it's not real. I'm so glad it never happened. It would have been a waste of time. The only thing... Actually, CW didn't even make that. They almost continued it, but yeah, maybe it's for the best. Because CW almost continued Swamp Thing. But I don't think they could have lived up to that first season.
Yeah, that was I actually really enjoyed that.
That show probably would have done great now. I think maybe it's just like they did it too soon. Because the whole reason why they canceled it is because it was too expensive to make the first season. But now we like live in a time not too far after that where big budget superhero shows exist. AKA the Marvel shows, but
yeah,
with like James Gunn in the lead of DC or whatever, I think they definitely would have been like, oh, we can greenlight a huge budget Swamp Thing show.
Yeah.
But now we're going to get a Swamp Thing movie, so it's even better.
Nice.
But yeah, so Powerpuff Girls, cartoon's great, live action, mature teenage drama show. We don't need that. Next thing I have is, so Will Smith, period. So Will Smith, I don't know who's
Will Smith's on his period.
He was, I don't know what that streamer guy's name is. I don't care for streamers and that whole community, but he was on some channel, some Twitch channel, big streamer guy.
Okay.
And they had asked him about, I don't know the exact question, but essentially they had asked him something in regards to like I Am Legend 2 and whatever.
Right.
And he had said I Am Legend 2 is like still happening with Michael B. Jordan.
Yeah.
But so is Hancock 2.
Oh.
And may feature, you would have never guessed it, Zendaya.
Huh.
Yeah. Because Zendaya's in everything. So a sequel to two books that didn't exist are happening.
Huh.
Both featuring Will Smith.
I don't know what to say.
And one of them is a sequel to a story with the guy that died with that actor.
Yeah. I don't even know. What do you do? What?
I don't know what you're supposed to do with a second Hancock book.
No, what?
The only thing I could think of, and it would suck, it would be a shitty ass movie, is if he was a superhero for, all that time that we didn't see him.
Mm-hmm.
And then because of age, got back into his old habits, and then again had to learn how to be like a person again.
So you're saying that they're just gonna remake the first one, but like as a sequel?
Yeah, like a requel, because it'll be the same plot points, and
I
it'll
hope
be
they
the
don't do
same
that.
movie but for different reasons.
Rather that, or they're gonna do the stupid, I'm getting old. Who's gonna take? Wait. Also, before I continue with that statement, we're also talking about a character who's not supposed to age.
Yeah.
Like, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying like Will Smith's not allowed to age, but
literally in the movie, the whole thing was that like when him and
yeah, but like, what are they supposed to do? Come up with some dumb reason why now he's finally aging and he's gonna need someone who's gonna like take his place, and so they're gonna call in another Michael B. Jordan.
no, it'll be Zendaya.
I don't know what's worse, the idea of Zendaya being his replacement or her being another one of like the character, like a similar character as Charlize Theron. How do you pronounce her last name?
Not like that.
Charlize
Theron.
Yeah.
Everyone says it differently.
I'm trying to think. She says it in a specific way, and that's how I try to say it. But anyways, if she's just going to play a similar character to that.
You know what I think they were going to do? I think they're going to do the same thing they did in the Bad Boys and make her a daughter he didn't know about.
But wasn't he not able to reproduce?
I don't think they're going to care. I think if Will Smith is going to be like an executive producer, possibly be
I don't know.
That's time. So there was a press conference.
Oh?
For Kojima Productions.
Oh.
And not only was there a really, really long trailer, because you know Hideo does that.
Yeah. Isn't there something really controversial about?
Yes. So there's a character.
Yeah.
By the name of Neil in the game, who's played by a Italian? I think he's Italian. He's rather Italian or Spanish actor. And the character is like, from the footage that we've seen, he's going to be a character that kind of mirrors Mads Mikkelsen's character from the first Death Stranding game.
I never played Death Stranding.
So, but you know, like have you ever seen footage of the game where he was like a Vietnam soldier and he's got like all these soldiers surrounding him and they're all like covered in tar?
No.
Seriously? And he's got like tar teardrops. And
I think I've seen the tar teardrops.
Okay, so his character in the first game, he's, spoiler alert, he's Sam's dad.
Oh.
And Sam keeps seeing all these visions of his dad, but he thinks that they're the baby Lou's dad. Because he was told that could happen. He was told that anytime he plugs in, he could see like fragments of memories of when the baby was born. But he's actually seeing visions of his own dad because he was a BB when he was born. But when he sees his dad as like a soldier. And anytime he sees him, he'll have like umbilical cords that are stretched to these skeleton soldiers as well. And they all like rise from tar and so on and so forth. But what I'm getting at is that it looks like in the footage, this new character, Neil, is very similar. Because he too is like covered in tar. He's in military gear and he's got skeleton soldiers all around him.
Right.
But the controversy is because he's wearing a bandana, you know, because Hideo's never made a callback to any of his games before. He's wearing a bandana, so people are like, oh, he must be Snake.
With the pictures I've seen,
yes, he does. And then there is another thing. Hideo Kojima, when he first saw this actor, he saw him in the movie Old Guard. The Old Guard. And it's just
coming out with a sequel.
And some other movie. And he said publicly, I'd really like to work with this guy. He looks just like Solid Snake. It's uncanny. But that was before Death Stranding 2. And so people are like going crazy and they're like, oh my God, it must be Solid Snake.
That I think is stupid. Like
Yes.
people saying that it's Solid Snake, because I never had the impression that it was going to be Solid Snake.
Right. It's just a callback to his own character.
I just think that it's a strange callback. Because like there'd be a difference if like the character wore like a black bandana that was like a very normal bandana. Mm-hmm. But this one is very thick and padded.
But that's how oh my gosh. I'm blanking on his name. The artist that did all of the Metal Gear concept arts, and he's doing the Death Stranding stuff. That's how he designs characters.
Yeah.
And first off, so there might be that one person that's like, oh, but Meryl from Metal Gear Solid 1 was originally in Police Knots. Yeah, he was able to do that because Police Knots was a Konami game.
Yeah.
And so was Metal Gear.
Right.
So he was legally able to bring his own character from one franchise to another,
right,
without it being like a canon or a crossover or whatever. He does not own Snake.
Right.
Yes, he wrote Snake and he made Snake and so on and so forth.
Right.
And he's invested so much time into Snake. But he doesn't own the character. Konami does.
Yeah.
And Konami doesn't want anything to do with Hideo Kojima. So they're not going to be like, oh yeah, here you go. Here's our most valuable character.
Yeah.
He's just calling back something he made.
Yeah. And
people love. And he knows would have gotten attention.
Yeah.
He knows gamers better than anyone. So, yeah, like people are just like, oh, this guy looks just like Solid Snake. Or is it Solid Snake? It's like, no, it's not.
It's definitely
a guy named Neil.
It's definitely not Solid Snake.
Who's not an American guy. Like, he even has an accent in the game and everything. I mean, it is definitely clear that a lot of these people are like new Metal Gear fans.
Right.
Like they weren't there for the birth and for the evolution of the Metal Gear franchise.
Yeah.
Because for people who were a part of that, or who grew up when Metal Gear was coming out, you know, brand new.
Yeah.
They probably knew these things. They knew that like, oh, this is a callback to this movie, and this is inspired off of this.
Right.
Which Hideo Kojima does all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, hell, like Hal Otacon, so the character Otacon, Hal Emmerich. Hal is the first name. His first name is from Hal, 2001: A Space Odyssey, and Emmerich is based off of one of his favorite film directors.
Yeah.
The guy who did Independence Day and Stargate. Mm-hmm. His name was Rob Emmerich.
Yeah.
So it's like Hideo Kojima just does this. This is like what he... Like, there's a character in the first Death Stranding named Die Hardman, whose name is John McClane.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I don't know.
No, it's almost like when Callisto Protocol came out.
Yeah.
Like, don't get me wrong. Like, when they first announced Callisto Protocol, there's a part of me there's a very tiny part of me that wished that Callisto Protocol was in the Dead Space universe.
Yeah, me too.
Because then it gave the potential that Dead Space was going to make a comeback. But I knew damn well that it was not in the Dead Space universe.
Right.
But there were still a shit ton of people who were like, well, they got the same things in the game, so it must be Dead Space. No. The guy who created the game said, I'm ripping... He quite literally ripped off his own game.
Well, that's what he said.
Right.
He said, artists rip each other off all the time. Why can't I rip myself off?
Right. Like, he's quite literally just ripping himself off so that he kind of has the excuse to make Dead Space again.
Yeah. And tell a scary story and so on and so forth.
Right. And which, by the way, like, even though Callisto Protocol wasn't as good as Dead Space, it was still pretty fucking good.
And Dead Space, again, is also in a culmination of a bunch of different things. He said on like a gore and horror aspect, it was based off of like a French film. But aside from that, aesthetics and story-wise, it's highly influenced off of Event Horizon. Which, if you watch Event Horizon, you could be like, I could see where he got Dead Space from.
And the gameplay itself was like a huge inspiration off
from
of like,
Resident Evil 4.
Yeah.
Like the whole over-the-shoulder thing was Resident Evil 4.
Right.
And he looked at that and he's like, I could do that better.
Yeah.
And in my opinion, he did.
I know he for sure did. I fucking hate the gameplay of the original Resident Evil 4. A lot of people,
it definitely hasn't aged well.
It hasn't, and a lot of people are like, "Oh, there's like my favorite Resident Evil game." I don't know how. The gameplay's so fucking annoying. I don't know how that's your favorite.
Well, we're also just not really part of that generation where like that was cool and innovative and different. Like you're replaying Metal Gear, the first Metal Gear Solid, and it's very different.
Oh yeah, for sure.
But
it irritates the shit out of me.
But it's fun. Like you get a hang of it and you enjoy yourself and you have fun with the story. And
debatable.
Spoiler alert for people, Brandon ended up having a really hard time with the Gray Fox boss fight. But
yeah. I honestly, although I had a hard time with that boss fight, I had more fun with that boss fight than
the Vulcan Raven.
Fucking stupid.
Yeah.
I would understand you trying to come up with the clever idea of a secret agent going toe-to-toe with the tank.
Yeah.
Got it. That's badass.
Right.
But that game is not designed for that kind of boss fight.
But he did it.
He did. It's dumb.
For a game that was made for the PlayStation 1 and was as advanced as it was for its time, they did it. They accomplished man going toe-to-toe with the tank.
Yeah, but it's stupid. But the Gray Fox fight, it did irritate the shit out of me, but in a way that I still enjoyed myself. And I got to, like, learn from my mistakes. But with the tank one, I kind of just felt like I was doing all the right things. They just weren't fucking working because I'm going up against a tank.
Okay, so I do want to make one more note, but I do, because we're talking about Metal Gear, I want to circle back to Death Stranding for a second.
Okay.
But off camera, after you were done playing Metal Gear, I did say, and I will tell you again in the audience, the biggest trouble that you had with Metal Gear is that unlike any other game, especially in our time, most games, doesn't matter what it is, have some kind of like hint or tutorial or something like that.
Right.
Whilst Metal Gear is huge on context, you have to pay attention to what characters tell you, and because the characters essentially tell you how to play.
Yeah.
Like whether they're deliberate and they'll be like, oh, press these controls, or they'll do something, you didn't have this privilege, but like when the game first came out, like Campbell says, like, oh, her frequency's on the back of the CD case.
Yeah.
And you were like, what? And I was like, well, it's not on the, we don't have a case because it's digital, but, and it's the Master Collection edition of the game.
Right.
But quite literally, if you were playing this game when it released and he said that, you'd have to look on the back of the CD case and see a picture of Meryl like talking on the comms and be like, oh shit, that's her frequency right there, and like look it up yourself.
Yeah.
But like the game's huge on context and there's literally no tutorial for anything.
Yeah.
You kind of have to figure out how to play the game as you go, which is really cool and was super innovative the way that he did it for its time. But, you know, when you're a first time player and no one tells you that, you're like, what is this game?
Yeah.
But circling back to Death Stranding, another big thing. And again, I think it's purely just like a nod to Metal Gear. and it's like Hideo Kojima and the concept artist, like these two guys, most of their game development career was Metal Gear Solid. There's a so in the first game there was these, so there's BTs, beach things. That's what those floating dead people
They're
are.
called beach things.
They're called BTs, yeah.
No, BT is like, that's a cool, like,
But yeah, it stands for beach things. So essentially there were like there's different names for them, but in the gameplay aspect of the game, they're kind of referred to as nightmares, which they're like these big BTs. They're like, whether they're like in the shape of a lion or one's in the shape of like a giant flying whale, you know. There's also a BT that's like a giant person.
right.
It was like a kaiju sized person walking through a city that you had to take down.
That's kind of cool.
You know, it was sick. And Troy Baker's character Higgs was like spruing out from like different parts of the body, and he was controlling it. But in the new game, there's like a really small like snippet of like two of them fighting each other in a city, like same like kaiju statuses. But there was a close up of one, and there's actually a statue of this specific one. I forgot what it's called. It's called like the something man. But it's essentially one of he's got wings this time, but his head is like this machine thing that looks just like Metal Gear Rex from the first Metal Gear Solid. And people are like, what the? Like, some people think that there's going to be that there might be a potential lawsuit because of how similar his head looks. Because it's literally like a giant black tar body, but his head is like a machine.
Right.
And it's the same shape and design of Metal Gear Rex. But again, these are two guys, one director and one concept artist, who have been working on Metal Gear their whole like careers.
Right.
Like, yeah, they're probably rather gonna reuse or potentially just nod to like their greatest creation, you know.
Yeah.
So I think that's what that is. But there's a statue of it. They showed like the collector's edition, Troy Baker, Hideo Kojima, Norman Reedus, and then the guy who plays the new, I don't know what his name is, but there's like in the new game there's like a doll. I think he's actually named like Doll Man or something. But there's a doll that hangs. He looks like he's gonna be annoying as shit, but he looks like his like frames per second is like lower than everyone else's, so he's kind of cartoony, but he's a talking doll. But anyways, that actor was up on stage, and they were all there when they were showing the collector's edition of the game, and it had like a bunch of bonus content, gear, and early access to stuff. 48 hours early access to the game, and if you get the collector's edition, and I think also the digital deluxe edition, but the collector's edition had the statue of this specific boss.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like levitating, and his wings are all sprawled out, and he's got like tar wrapped around him, and he's got like that Metal Gear shaped head, and it looked sick.
Wow.
Yeah, $230 later, but as all collector's editions are. But
Yeah, unfortunately.
But it honestly, there's been some long trailers before, especially Death Stranding related. This trailer, because I watched the conference, Hideo Kojima's like, oh yeah, I edited this myself, blah blah blah. They show the trailer. It's pretty long, but it was, at first I was like, this isn't actually that bad compared to what I've seen before.
Yeah.
And there's even a point where they show like they start showing more like titles and you would at the end of a trailer.
Mm-hmm.
In a lot of Hideo Kojima's projects and in a lot of just Japanese projects, especially like animes, at the end of a trailer there'll be like oh my gosh, there'll be dialogue like over like the last couple tiles or something.
Right.
So I was like, oh wow. I was like, that was a long trailer, but that wasn't like that bad. And then it just kept going. There's just more. Like it was like 2 trailers slapped together. And I was like, what is happening? There's more. Because the first one, it was just a lot of like frames and it was like a lot of shots of stuff with like one continuous dialogue over it. So it's like, it doesn't really feel like they're spoiling much. It just looks more like they're showing what the game looks like and what craziness like you're going to get into.
And that there's going to be a large amount of the game.
Right. With like a snippet of like an actual cutscene in the beginning of the trailer. And then after where I thought the trailer was going to end, and it kept going, it felt more like they were showing off too much. And I was like, oh, fuck, stop. You quit while you're ahead.
Right.
But no, that trailer just kept going.
Jesus.
But it looks like a fun game. I kind of wish it was coming out for Xbox, but it's PlayStation exclusive again. The reason I'm only saying that because the Director's Edition just came out for Xbox for the first game, but
I've never played the first one.
I'm definitely getting this game, and I'm playing it day one. I might even buy the digital deluxe edition and see if I can get it 48 hours early.
Wow,
I want it. I want to play this game. Looks sick as hell. It looks insane. Like visually, it's nuts. Like. We've talked about this before. The Naughty Dog games are like remarkably impressive visually.
Yeah.
But I said that like my hot take was that Hellblade looked even better than a Naughty Dog game.
Yeah.
The second one, Senua Saga. I'm not talking about the first one.
No, I know. I would say environmentally.
I'm just saying all around. Like visually, it was like...
Yeah, I have to disagree.
Okay, disagree or not. I personally thought like I was... Again, Naughty Dog games are nuts.
Yeah.
But Hellblade like wowed me when visually. And I was like, holy shit, this looks nuts.
Mm-hmm.
Death Stranding 2 on another level.
Really?
It looks crazy good. When the first few couple trailers and like footage they released looked really good. And definitely putting it side by side between this game and the first game, it's a crazy jump. But this new trailer, something about it, you're like, it almost hurt to watch. It looked so good.
Huh.
Visually. I mean, I'll have to show you like a small portion of the trailer because I don't think you should watch the whole 30 minutes of that trailer.
Jesus.
It was only like 10 minutes, but
that's still long.
Yeah, it was a long trailer.
A trailer should only be like
2 minutes.
You can still put way too much in a 2-minute trailer.
Yeah.
The fact that it's almost 10 minutes long.
Yeah, it was crazy long.
Jeez.
At least it felt like 10 minutes.
Oh my god. Like, I've told you this before, but my ideal preference for a trailer when it comes to... I mean, they can kind of do it with movies, but it works better. No, actually, sorry, that's a lie. They can do it with both movies and video games.
Yeah.
Is, like, the most teasing teaser of all teases.
Yeah.
Like, for Doom... Mm-hmm. Like Doom Eternal, for example, all they need is the beginning sequence of him like loading his gun and putting on his helmet and then going.
Yeah,
that's all you need. That's it. Don't show me anything else.
Yeah,
just that.
Mm-hmm.
For Death Stranding, because I remember when the first game came out, all they showed was the beach. And then, like, footsteps, and then it was him at the end of the beach.
Yeah, and he was naked.
And then that was it.
Yeah.
And then I think like a month later they came out with the longer trailer.
Where the baby was there and he like picked it up and he was crying and whatnot.
But that's all you need.
Yeah.
Like for the second game, I guarantee you they just need to show rather Sam Reedus' character.
Which they kind of did. That first teaser, I don't know if you remember, like, it was like 2 years ago now, I think.
But that's all they need.
It was the girl, and she's like riding away on like a bike with one wheel, remember? And she had the baby, and she like crashes. But they did show Norman Reedus, Sam, for a brief moment, and he had like white hair. And then that was it.
But that's all, yeah, that's all you need. And all I would say is just make it a little closer to the release date.
Yeah.
But that's all you need because it tells people it's coming. People are going to have a shit ton of questions. And then it comes out and then they'll be like, wow.
Yeah, because where this trailer, so what I was talking about before where it should have ended, there's a great moment in like towards the end where they show a few tiles, like word tiles and whatnot, and then you hear Higgs, the new version of Higgs, talking for he's just saying something maniacal or whatever, and for like a split second you see him like holding Sam by like the neck or something, and Higgs opens his mouth and a tentacle comes out.
Oh.
Like a giant tentacle comes out of his mouth, like a tongue.
Gross.
But they cut it, and I was like, where they cut it right there is where the trailer should have ended.
Right.
That's it. Like, that's how movie trailers are.
But it kept
going, and I was like, oh my God, stop! No, but I'm still excited. It's still surprising.
You're way too close, man. That's how I feel about movie trailers. You're way too close, man.
Strangely enough, though, even with everything that they showed, I still have no idea what the hell is going on in any of it. So I could still go into the game blind and like still find everything new. It's just there's going to be like so many shots that I'll be like, oh, this is from this part into the trailer.
It's kind of fucked up for me to say this, but when it comes to a lot of Japanese media, I never know what's going on. Like, there's this cool... I've never seen the movie, but there's this cool Japanese action, like, alien invasion movie. And if you watch the trailer to it, it, like, makes sense in the beginning portion. Like, there's this weird alien artifact that, like, comes into, like, a business building thing. Right. And then it starts, like, spread. And I don't know the whole premise, but, like robot alien things take over.
Yeah.
But if you keep watching the trailer, there's like time travel involved. And then the whole second half of the trailer takes place in like ancient Japan. And it has nothing to do with an alien invasion. And I'm like, what the fuck is this movie? And if you look at the bio of the movie, it makes even less sense. Still have no idea what the movie's about.
Yeah.
But it's only with Japanese stuff. Because I've seen trailers for Chinese movies, Korean movies all over. They all like aside from the fact that I can't understand a word they're saying, I kind of get what's going on. Japanese media makes no fucking sense to me.
Dude, Korean movies and shows,
they're sick.
They know their shit.
Dude, I talked about it so much because I wanted you and Chris to watch it so bad. But the show Bloodhounds is such a good fucking show. Like, me personally, not like, for example, when it comes to Daredevil, I love the choreography. I love the fighting. It's just so well done.
Right.
And it's hard to find shows or movies that kind of like hit that satisfying like punch. John Wick is really good at it. Atomic Blonde was good at it. Right. There's a lot of movies that kind of hit it the right way. But Bloodhounds, I saw the trailer for it and I'm like, oh, I'll try out the first episode, see how I feel about it. Right off the bat, I was hooked. Great storytelling. It's got that satisfying like vigilante feel to it. And then the fighting, just like it kind of like, because it's a lot of like boxing type fighting,
Mm-hmm.
but the way the main character fights, it kind of feels like a live action version of Violet from Arcane.
Interesting.
It's very satisfying to watch. And
Bloodhounds.
Bloodhounds,
Interesting.
so good. And it's not like random either. Like there's one character who's like very unhinged and he says very random shit, but it feels intentional. It doesn't feel like their conversations like sidetrack or anything. It's a very like steady show, but you just have that one character who's very random and he's very odd, but you can tell it's like, okay, he's the weird character.
You still need to watch the second season of Squid Game.
I do. I want to watch it so bad. I was trying to wait for Casey, but I don't think she's as excited for it as I am, so I might just watch it. But yeah, I want to watch that too. I've heard a lot of good things about the second season.
It was awesome. And
At first I was afraid that it was just going to be like, oh, well, it's a lot of the same stuff from the first show.
No.
But that's what I heard. I heard there's a lot of cool shit that happens.
See, that's kind of where I'm not going to say how they do it, but in the first couple episodes, they get to a point to where even the main character is like convincing himself and the audience that like, all right, let's do this shit again. And then it flips it not only for the audience, but it flips it for the main character. So no one knows what the fuck is going on.
Oh, damn.
And it's pretty cool. And yeah, other than that, that pretty much that's it for my list. There is one other thing that happened for me anyways. I finally saw Longlegs because I wanted to see it in
I haven't
theaters.
seen that yet.
I wanted to see it in theaters so bad, but I ended up just never going. And it's finally on Hulu. And I was just, this past weekend, I was just like, why not? Like, what's stopping me from watching this? And I watched it. I do have my opinions. I think we could even do a whole episode on it.
Well, good, because I want to watch it.
I think you should watch it, and I think we should talk about it.
Because I heard from what people have like said without spoiling anything, I heard that it's like our generation Silence of the Lambs.
I could see why they would say that. It's very different. It goes in a very different direction.
I think like maybe it's just the premise of like the main character being a female FBI agent who isn't taken seriously, and one of her major cases going like tracking down this like serial killer.
Yeah.
But I'm very curious. I want to watch it so bad.
Yeah. It's pretty intense. It's heavy though. I'd say,
which is good.
Like just be prepared. Like it gets dark and it gets dark quick.
But see, that's what I'm. Oddly enough, I think that's what I'm excited for, because I think where a lot of horror movies or even psychological horror movies go wrong is that they don't go far enough.
Yeah.
I personally think like the more limitless the movie is, the better.
And I'll go into it more if we do an episode or if we talk about it on the podcast. But there is one YouTuber, I'll say who it is. It was Papa Meat, who had. I mean, everyone's entitled to their opinion, but I'm gonna call him out because when people ask him about it, he says something that's pretty misleading. Because there's a big trait about the character that they introduce in the beginning of the movie that is very important.
Okay.
And it's not even in the trailer. So it's like when you're seeing it, it's very new. You're seeing it for the first time. But he says that this very specific trait about the character is only prominent in the beginning of the movie and isn't brought up at any other point in the movie, which is not true. It's not as prominent. It's more on the nose in the beginning of the movie because you're seeing it in action. But throughout the rest of the movie, it's blended in more with how the movie's shot and the storytelling a little bit. Because
like it happens more naturally throughout the movie.
Not only that, but because in the beginning of the movie they actually talk about it, and in the rest of the movie they don't. It's something you have to look out for more.
Got it.
Like it's blended more into the narrative, and also it comes together, and there is like an explanation for it at some point. But he's telling people that like no, it's only in the beginning of the movie, and then they get rid of it and they ditch it. But it's just, and again, he's entitled to his opinion. The movie's shot great. It's a great movie, but that's like the one thing. It's like it's a little misleading, but that's just me. And you'll see what I mean when you watch the movie.
So, change of subject.
Uh-huh.
It's the only topic that I have for today, but it's speaking of things that we've seen. I finally had the opportunity to watch it, but the new Daredevil show dropped last week.
Are they dropping it every weekly, or is
I think so, because there's only 2 episodes out.
Okay.
Right now. Actually, let me look at that up right now. I wanted to figure this out beforehand, but
we'll jump to when Brandon's figured this out.
I was gonna see when they dropped a new episode. They actually just dropped one today.
So every Tuesdays?
I guess so, because there's now 3 episodes. I've only watched the first 2. But I've said it multiple times throughout this episode. I loved the Netflix Daredevil show.
Yeah.
So much. And I was so scared that Disney was going to ruin it.
Well, it's a lot of the same people. Like, creative team-wise.
Right. Which I kind of learned more later on. But, either way, going into it, I was still nervous because I didn't know how similar or how different it was going to be.
Right.
But it's actually really good. There's no Disney tropes.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing that feels like that Disney thing that ruins everything. I do have one gripe, and it's only happened once so far. Obviously, there's only 3 as of right now. There's only 3 episodes. I've only watched 2, and I'm not going to say anything that spoils anything. But in the first episode, they use a little too much CGI. There's one time when they used green screen, and a couple times when they used CGI when they didn't need to. I will say I understand why they are, because they're trying to present Daredevil, because you see it a lot in Echo too.
Okay.
But they're trying to make Daredevil...
Sorry, everyone. I just caught that we were having some technical difficulties. So, Brandon, you want to try to sum up what they just missed in that 20 minutes of conversation?
Yeah.
So you left off with green screen.
Yeah. So I understand why they chose some of the stuff that they wanted to do, because they wanted to kind of make Daredevil more comic book accurate, which is kind of weird to say. It's just Charlie Cox in the original show. He put in a lot of time with training for martial arts, parkour, acrobats, and all that kind of stuff,
right?
So that he could be as authentic to Daredevil as possible without visual effects or anything like that.
Yeah.
So it could have been done without CGI, and if they wanted him to be more Spider-Man which Daredevil in the comic books is, he's very acrobatic and He moves in weird ways like Spider-Man. If they wanted to do that, they could have just hired a stuntman to do those very specific movements. Like, they didn't need the CGI, and the parts with the green screen didn't necessarily need to be done with the green screen. They could have just done that like any other movie or show or whatever. But it's still good, and it doesn't really take me away from me enjoying it. I still like it a lot. It's not bad. It doesn't feel like Disney's ruining it. It's really good. I'm kind of curious with like certain things, like, because they did mention Echo very briefly.
Yeah.
It's like so brief that you could miss it if you're barely paying attention, but they haven't mentioned She-Hulk yet, which is probably a good thing. I'm just kind of curious on where She-Hulk falls into the Daredevil timeline, because based on how this show starts, which I can't really say how it starts without spoiling both the old show and this one.
But it's a direct sequel.
Right. But like it's just kind of hard to tell where She-Hulk falls into all of it. Yeah. It doesn't really make sense. It kind of seems like a fever dream.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't really fall into anywhere.
Right.
And then you brought this up, but now we're re-saying it. I'm very curious where Thunderbolts is going to take place.
Yeah, because pretty much my whole point was, you know, back in when the Netflix shows first started, they, regardless on your opinion or what what people might actually know, they actually confirmed that the Netflix shows weren't a part of the MCU, regardless of the references that they made, because they were still Marvel properties.
Yeah.
But they were not a part of the MCU.
Yeah.
But in the merger, they kind of just neglected that, and they made it as if these shows have been a part of the MCU the whole time.
Yeah.
But like pointing out She-Hulk, it's like there's like, where does She-Hulk fit into all of this? Like you did say that in the first couple episodes there's like a year break, but like, where are you supposed to squeeze in like a whole new suit that he wore? And where are you supposed to squeeze in that he had a whole other love interest and that he went to LA?
Yeah.
And, that She-Hulk just like dropped him out of the air and popped in on like a scene and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Back to this like very grounded show. It's like, where does this make sense, let alone fit? Yeah. Unless they're just going to disregard the She-Hulk thing and just be like, we're done with her.
I kind of, honestly, what I hope happens is that somewhere in the future, I hope that they bring She-Hulk back. Like, I don't mind if they bring in the same actress and they use the same like body model for She-Hulk and everything. Yeah. But they treat it like as if the She-Hulk show happened differently. Or like just maybe similar events. Or like the key points happened. Like the whole Abomination trial happened.
Right.
And then maybe she met Matt Murdock. But that's it. They don't mention any of the other controversial stuff. Any of the things that no one cared about or that didn't like. And that's it. Or maybe even they just disregard the fact that her and Matt had a relationship. Mm-hmm. Because that's just not a great era of Marvel. And we could easily forget about it if Marvel lets us. But... and like you kind of meant, or we both did, but like the references in the Netflix shows when it came to like Jessica Jones and Luke Cage and what have you, I think there was one in Luke Cage. I can't necessarily remember, but I know that it was right after the first Avengers movie came out.
Yeah.
In one of the early episodes of Jessica Jones in like the first season, they mentioned a catastrophic event similar to the alien invasion with the Avengers in that Jessica Jones episode. So it felt like they could be intertwined, which is why I was very confused when those shows first came out.
Yeah.
But I kind of like, as much as I wouldn't mind those versions coming back, I personally didn't mind them. I would be kind of curious about Luke Cage, because Luke Cage is a mob boss at the very end of
the Luke Cage show. For those of you who, sorry, spoiler alert, but he's the new mob boss.
Right.
So that would be kind of a cool dynamic. But I would be completely fine if they just leave it with Matt Murdock. I love this version of Daredevil. I have for a long time.
Yeah.
I know there probably could have been other ways they could have brought in this version of Matt Murdock, or kind of like Disney's version, like this Dimensions version that's very parallel to the Netflix version. But I'm still enjoying it very much. Highly recommend for rather people who are curious about the Marvel's Daredevil. I would say that if you haven't seen it before, I personally would watch the first 3 seasons on Netflix first. Really get a grasp of what's going on, and then watch the new one. You technically could watch the new one. I just feel like there'd be a couple small things you'd be kind of confused on, and you wouldn't get as much of the things that are really like that hit hard to the audience. Like, it just wouldn't be the same unless you watched the old show.
Did they add the original seasons to Disney Plus?
Yes.
Okay.
They've been on there for a couple years now.
Gotcha.
Like as soon as Matt Murdock showed his beautiful face on No Way Home, they added the Daredevil show to Disney Plus.
Gotcha.
Which I think was kind of like their way of confirming that Daredevil is now part of the MCU.
Yeah.
But I'm very excited. Highly recommend the show, especially to you. I don't really want to talk too much about it because I personally think you should watch it. But if you decide not to, then we can talk more. There's also Invincible to talk about. Like I mentioned this to Aaron plenty of times, but I'm very familiar with what happened and happens in the Invincible story from beginning to end. And so like watching the show, and I see a lot of the nods that they make and references to what happens later on. I'm so excited, and I want to talk about it with Aaron or whoever I'm watching it with all the time, but I can't because I don't want to spoil it. Which is another reason why I had a very confusing conversation with that guy at Monterey, because he was bringing up like that spinoff, and I'm not going to say too much, but based on things that spinoff is like talking about, I was like, well, that doesn't make sense because in this show this happens, and he's like, oh yeah, but it still takes place after. I'm like, I don't think that's true, but okay. But anyways, highly recommend it. And we will probably be talking about Invincible. Not this episode, but the next episode. Because as of recording this week, the last episode will be coming out this Thursday.
Yeah.
So that'll be exciting to talk about.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
You sure will. We'll probably talk Invincible and bunches of other stuff. But, Brandon, until then, I think that does it for today's episode.
Probably.
So, with that being said, I hope y'all's had a great time listening to us ramble like a bunch of bitches. Bunch of bitch. And so whether you're just driving or raising your hand like a freaking ding dong.
What a moron.
What a ding dong.
Like that guy who didn't know Brandon Bruce Lee's middle name. You're a fucking moron.
What a moron. Yeah, that's going to stick with you, dude.
Yeah, you idiot.
Oh my gosh. You know what? And please remind me, because I still don't think we brought it up. I just remembered this from like the first episode. I told you to remind me of another comment that stood out to me that I wanted to talk about.
Oh, geez.
That happened quite a while ago at this point. But if you can remember, or if I'll try to remember, I'll try to bring it up in the next episode. But
Gosh, y'all's in the comments are crazy. Anyways,
Y'all's are crazy.
not in these comments because these comments are dead. But it's fine. We'll get there. With that being said, Brandon, I hope you have a good night.
I hope you have a good night.
And I hope y'all's have a good night. And we will see y'all in the next episode.
Yeah.
Peace.
Peace.